Hello. Thank you everyone for being here. I really appreciate it. So this is one of the things I really want to do with my channel, and that's bring people on that maybe we have disagreements about something, or we could have discussions or any type of thing. So I was very fortunate to have someone who watched some of my videos named Tom come and ask me, send me some great stuff on email and have a discussion here. So we're going to be talking about socialism. I don't want to really put words in his mouth of what specifically he'll be talking about, so I'll leave him kind of outline his case at first. One of the things that's important is I put the links to things he'll be talking about in the description of the video. So feel free to follow along with those if you like. But yeah, I'm going to introduce you to Tom here. I'm going to get him on audio. Please, I ask you all, let me know, make sure the audio on my end and his end is good. So thanks for being here, Tom. Everyone should be able to hear you. And yeah, do you want to just introduce a little about yourself for a minute, and then we'll go ahead and get started?
Yeah, well, I found you by trying to follow what was going on in Virginia.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm a big fan of the Patriot Hour, and some of those other channels. And anyway, I'm a military retiree. I live in Tennessee, and one of the things that I've been concerned about is the idea of liberty. Actually, I went to a drama college, and I studied. My degree is in drama, or I have some master's degrees, but and I got to a point where I wrote a musical about the Statue of Liberty and its origin, and to do that, I had to read like three dozen books, and I think I have an idea of what liberty is, but I've always been kind of depressed that people don't talk about it, and kind of assume that it's passé or something. I don't know what the reason is. I do know that if you try to get, it's a good way to mention the word liberty, and a person who is on the wrong side of things these days will always wince when they hear that word.
I agree.
So it's sort of a way to discriminate as to whether you're talking to someone good or bad, and they can't disguise themselves once you bring that subject up.
Yeah.
Rob, your channel, your series here is called Normal America.
Correct, yes.
And I don't think right now, I think you would agree with me that right now we don't have, America is not normal.
Right, I agree.
America is what we think of as normal. America is something that is revolves around something called the idea of America. And this idea of America is one in which you guide your own boat. You have the freedom to make your own way in life. And Dinesh D'Souza has been talking about that. And by the way, he's also now making some, his next movie is going to be about socialism. And his last 3 videos have been about socialism, and I encourage everybody to listen to those. And
just real quick, I think it may have been Dinesh D'Souza I first heard mention it like this, but I've also read a lot on the subject, and to me, the thing that was uniquely American, the thing that uniquely made the United States the greatest country in the world, was a focus on liberty. And what we mean by liberty is it was the first country that focused on the individual as what's important to the success of a country, as opposed to some sort of collective or some sort of hierarchy. And so when I think about liberty, I think of personal freedoms and personal responsibility. To me, liberty comes with both of those. But yeah, so far I agree with everything you said. I think that it's a certain class of people think it's a dirty word, just like patriotism or nationalism. So,
right. When you talk about the opposite of liberty, sometimes I think about the Star Trek TV series, in which they had these groups called the Borg, and they were all controlled once they were part of the collective. So I think that actually that example is very apropos, and people should go back and watch those episodes and give some thought to, do they want to be living in that type of world, or do they want to be living in a world in which people have rights and freedoms and are protected from stuff?
So I think,
But
is it fair to say, to start with, just at the top, and I promise you can outline your whole case. I
okay,
think for us, the central theme of this discussion will be the question of should it be allowed in the United States to be able to actively endorse socialism? Is that fair
oh
to say?
boy,
And you say that it
yeah,
should not?
socialism is not good government.
Mm-hmm.
We don't, and D'Souza talks about in his speeches, he says there are no real examples of it ever having worked.
Mm-hmm.
And a long time, 50 years ago, it was, you would be stupid if it would be a stupid statement to say, well, socialism really works.
Mm-hmm.
And then he talks about several types of socialism, like socialism in Scandinavia. And so anyone who thinks socialism has worked anywhere should probably listen to his latest 3 videos, and they'll learn something from that.
But you definitely think that we should not allow advocacy for socialism in the United States?
Right. As I say, it infringes on the rights of persons, that all rights are subordinate to the good of the many.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is simply tyranny.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have any basis for feeling good from one survival from one time to the next depends upon sucking up to people,
Mm-hmm.
rather than doing something of value. So I say socialism is poison for, if you have a good government and a society now, and you let socialism take hold, it's going to poison you. It's like it's a parasite.
We should I don't disagree with much of this, but I think for the purposes of the discussion, how would you define socialism particular, like in a specific way?
Okay, let's say we were devising a constitution, and there's 5 of us in the room, and we're talk about, let's put together a government, let's put it in paper, and then we'll have these rights. And 3 of these people look at each other and say, sure. And then they send the 2 of them out for pizza, and the other 3 say, this constitution that 60 that just vote themselves the wealth of the other 40%. That will take care of those guys. And then they come back. Now, do you think really that you would, government, that can happen? D'Souza had an audience full of 100 people, and he said, look, the majority, it doesn't matter. So do you think does anyone here think it would be right for 99 of these people that are here to vote themselves all the wealth of this other person, this one other person who's over there? And no one would stand up and say, yeah, I think that's right. So the first point is it is stealing to take other people's money. And then what socialists do is they invent various excuses for that, like, oh, well, you're owed that money because of some.
Hey, let me interrupt you just real quick. I want to.
Government has to.
Just real quick, so I could refresh the stream. People are buffering a little, so let me just see. Just give me 30 seconds, see if I can fix it.
Okay. The bad powers that be have found us, and they're trying to interfere. Right?
That could be, but I think we should be okay now. Hey,
okay.
Destin, if you're using the internet, can you shut her down? Okay, thanks, man. All right, we should be good. We should be live again.
Okay. There you go.
I don't disagree with you.
So,
go on. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Socialism starts off by saying the government is responsible for what's in your pocket. that you should have money there, and the government's supposed to be responsible for that. Don't you want some? And stupid people say, well, sure, you can put money in my pocket. So, Seafield said, there's a sucker born every minute. Well, there is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Socialism is a scam that just appeals to these stupid people who think there's such a thing as a free lunch. What we've got to do is we've got to either get a lot of people smarter very fast, or we've got to stop the stupid people from voting.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got to at least convince them some way, or stop them some way from being stupid, or pushing our society in this stupid direction. It's made responsible to meet economic needs of the individual. One thing is, people say, oh, the Dow's up.
Mm-hmm.
The government must be doing its job correctly. Well, you see, that is a thing that the assumption that you're making is the government should be responsible for economic success. And we started off within was it the Declaration of Independence, mm-hmm. that we hold these truths to be self-evident, blah, blah, blah. One of them was that you had to have the right to pursue happiness, but the government was not told to issue happiness, to pay people money. Suppose back in 1776, or pardon me, 1789, when they were talking about putting together the Constitution, or 1787, I forget, in that time period. Mm-hmm. Suppose someone walked in and said, no, government should write everybody a check. They should employ everyone. I mean, that person would have been thrown out on their butt.
Right. I agree.
So today, though, someone will say that and they'll get applause. Oh, you're going to write me a check. So one of the things that evil does is it just evil thought. Now, there's a philosophy of liberty that is on this one site called schooland.net, CHOOLLAND.net. It's in the links there. Mm-hmm. And the philosophy of liberty says, if you use the government to take someone else's money and give it to you, it's still stealing.
Right.
You're just using the government as an agent. So my view is, even proposing that the government do that should be wrong.
Okay.
See some kind of something that happens to you when you suggest that will stop you from suggesting it, whatever it might be.
Okay, so just real quick, just so you know, it's having buffering issues. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shut it down for like 3 minutes and restart my computer and try it that way. I've told the chat, if we can't get it working live, me and you'll just record it and we'll put it up. But can you just give me like 3 minutes?
Okay.
I'm really sorry. I have no clue why it's doing this. It did this every time I've been talking about Virginia. It does this when I'm doing something live. So I don't know. But I will be right back.
Oh, boy. Yeah. Word Virginia, then.
Yeah. Right about now. But I'll let you know for sure when it comes on, and then we could go. But like I said, if we have trouble this time, everyone that could hear us, and for you, Tom, we'll just, if it starts doing those buffering issues, we'll just record it, not live. We'll post the link up later tonight, so no problem. We'll get through it. So Just give me 1 second. We'll see if it's running here. It should start any second here. Now, according to my OBS, it says it should be running really well, but
okay. So are we live or are we just recording?
Right now, we're going to be live. So anyone who's listening, if you can hear us, let us know if there's buffering issues. If it gets too bad, like I said, we'll just pre-record it. So just to pick up where we left off, yeah, you were saying about the idea of it being absurd that people could vote for other people's money. I have some points of contention, I guess, but I will say this is very similar to, I heard Penn Jillette from Penn and Teller say this once, who's basically a libertarian, and he said, you should not force a program on someone or force someone to pay something or redistribute their wealth with anything that you wouldn't do on the point of a gun. Because that when you use government force, you're actually using threat of violence and you're using the point of a gun. So he would say, a public library, are you willing to point a gun at someone's head and say, give me money for this library? Well, if not, then you should not be willing to vote to tax people to have their money go to a public library. So I think that's in line with what you're saying there.
Well, the first defining thing of socialism is that the government's made responsible to meet the economic needs of the individual. Mm-hmm. And once you do that, a bunch of things happen. The government's being judged by how much goods and services pour into the pocket of the individual. And actually, I want to refer to something even that Hillary Clinton said.
Okay.
Because she, as you know, her husband's, when she lost, he said to her, well, everybody hates someone who just detests everyone universally.
Right.
That effect.
But so let me ask this though. So here's where I can see some potential problems, though. How we define socialism becomes very important because I think almost everyone could agree. Well, not everyone, but a lot of people probably at least here will agree. Yeah, the idea of taking money from one group and giving it to another, that's theft. But does that mean then we have no government programs such as, for example, it is redistribution of wealth to take money from taxes and then provide for our military or to provide for our infrastructure? So do you allow for that sort of taxation that then goes for a common good, or do you think that that's also part of socialism?
I think that we should have a defined list of what the federal government is empowered to do. Mm-hmm. And the things that they're not empowered to do, worry about that.
So would you think Social Security, should that be illegal?
Well, Social Security is an earned, it's not really a benefit, it's insurance.
Well,
right.
But it's still redistributive. Think of it this way. Milton Friedman, the famous economist, he talks about the problems of Social Security. So just if you give me a second here, he says that it's actually a tax on the poor. And his reasoning is this. Poor people tend to get into the workforce quicker than the middle class or the upper class because middle and upper class people tend to put off going into the workforce because either their family has money or they're going into academia and further education. So if you went to your high school and you didn't really have a chance to go to college, you probably got a job when you were 17, which means you start paying into Social Security when you're 17. If you're poor, that also means your chances of living longer are less. So in reality, poor people pay into Social Security much earlier, like 4 to 7 years earlier than people that go to university. And then they also die and get the payout less. So it's not a direct, like, you contributed X dollars, now you get X dollars. So there are redistributive properties. So do you think that that's okay, I guess is the question.
Well, I think that we should have an amendment to the Constitution that says the federal government is empowered to do X, Y, and Z, and the rest of it, they should be out of it. It should be something the states do. And I think in particular, there should be no such thing as a federal benefit. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a difference between a federal benefit and something you've earned. Okay?
Right.
So it could be that you could say, if you want Social Security to be national, mm-hmm. which we do have people moving around from state to state, it could be that that's the best way to handle it, but it's not a benefit. It's an earned thing. It's not something that, in other words, you can look on the internet. The difference between a benefit is they can turn it off, but it's a requirement of the government. It's like a contract.
But how? So then you wouldn't consider Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All plan to be socialism then?
Medicare is entirely different because it's a benefit for the people that they're not paying for.
But I could theoretically get Social Security and never have paid in it in my life. Like I could be unemployed.
No, Social Security requires you to be a member for 40 quarters.
But if I'm unemployed, right, like my entire life, and I live to be old enough to collect Social Security, I still get to collect Social Security, correct? Or am I wrong about that?
No, you have to contribute to the system for 40 quarters.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. You're probably right about that. I don't know. But it's
something that you have to contribute to, and then you get back according to what you contributed. And even I will say that you don't get back. You get back about 1/3 of what you would have gotten if you'd invested in a stock,
right?
Or just in plain old gold or silver. So, but that's neither here nor there. But the point is that if you have, let's say you have some states where you have high taxes and high benefits, and you have some states where you have low taxes and low benefits. Well, that would be a good way to demonstrate which works better, wouldn't it? And then people would have the freedom to know to either go to a state that had high taxes or a state that had lower taxes. Right now, they're bailing out of the high tax states.
I guess
moving to the lower tax.
The distinction between a benefit and something that's earned, I don't know that it solves some of the problems though, because what if Bernie Sanders comes out and says, okay, so then it's Medicare for all as long as you've paid income tax for 20 quarters?
No, it's why what makes medical care any different? I'm going to use an argument from Rush Limbaugh. What makes Medicare any different from a lot of other things? Like, listen, yes, you're going to die without medical care, but you're going to die if you don't eat. So why shouldn't the federal government give you food? You can't work if you don't have an automobile. Why shouldn't the federal government give you an automobile? You're going to freeze to death if you don't have gas and electric. So they should pay your gas and electric bill, and clothe you. And it's endless.
Well, right, but you could make that same argument about Social Security. You could say,
I'm saying that the needs of the individual, getting something according to your need, that's socialism.
I guess I just don't see how Social Security doesn't fit in there. And the reason that it matters is if we're talking about criminalizing advocacy for socialism, I think that anytime you talk about criminalizing some sort of advocacy or speech, at the bare minimum, you have to be hyper specific. Because otherwise, it literally would be a crime to be like, well, I'm pushing for Social Security. That could potentially be an offense to lock someone up. So we have to be very specific on what exactly makes something socialist if we're going to say it's a crime to endorse it.
Well, they've pushed people into quote Social Security or given them benefits that haven't earned them. And in that way, that, in my view, that needs to be done away with. And if you say to yourself, well, hell, I don't want a country where there are these people who in later life, because they have no means to be able to put anything away, was stolen from them or something, and they're in the streets starving to death, and I don't want to death for one reason or another, then you might say, well, I want them to have something in their old age that they're not going to be, totally without anything. Then if there's a following for that, as there has been, then I don't see anything wrong with that. See that as then an impetus that says, well, if that's right, then everything else with socialism is right.
Right.
I'm going to draw the line there.
But I mean, you can see how
And
it's
and I don't say that
okay.
Social Security is not a benefit; it is an earned thing.
But like you said, you could see how you could be well intended, even if misinformed, and say, look, I don't want elderly people, even if they've not paid into the system, to be homeless on the street, like living without food. There's that same
Wait a minute. We have charities, don't we?
well, I agree, but so then you would be
And
against
so if you don't want to see people who are on the street doing badly, you can contribute to a charity that will help them. But do you have a right to make me contribute to that charity? I don't think so.
well that's fair. That's fine, and I won't quibble with that point here. But what I'm saying is that if you allow for the idea of Social Security for someone who quote hasn't earned it because you don't want to see an elderly person, then you have to allow for people to have decent intent to say other forms of social safety nets. Now, if you're just saying
If
purely
if you were to put that requirement on Social Security,
mm-hmm.
if you were to say no, we can't have Social Security without socialism, then I would say, well, the hell is Social Security?
Okay, all right, fair enough.
Because I'm not going to put up. There are so many evils associated with socialism that it's mind numbing.
Okay, all right, so fair enough. So yeah, what I'm just trying to do is, I don't disagree with you on a lot of what socialism of the evils of socialism. What I was saying in my live stream earlier today is though, the truth is there are very rarely a complete socialist country or a complete capitalist country. Most are a mix of some sort. So when you hear like Bernie, for example, decry the evils of our current system of capitalism, like he's wrong. We don't have a capitalist system right now. We have free markets, we have personal property rights, but we also have a lot of socialist policies. I would say that something like Social Security, Medicare, I would consider those all types of socialist policies. So it becomes difficult then to like it's important to define exactly what we're going to be criminalizing, because we're going to be talking about criminalizing aspects of speech. As much as you hate socialism, and I share a lot of that, I don't have a problem with some redistribution of wealth. Obviously, you would agree.
Well, let's say you take all the other aspects other than retirement,
Mm-hmm.
because people are going to move from state to state possibly,
Mm-hmm.
and they should take their retirement with them. But let's say everything else, if you think that it should be there, fine, but it should be at the state level.
Mm-hmm.
And in this way, those of us self-reliant and feel like we don't want to pay for other people's benefits,
Mm-hmm.
and we want to rely on ourselves for our own benefits, then we can move to a state that has low taxes and low benefits, and all those other people, they can enjoy high taxes and high benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll see which state prospers. And as these states prosper, people will move away from the states that don't prosper and move to the states that do, or whatever. But they'll have some freedom of choice. Otherwise, there's no place to go where you to escape taxes. Feel that the entire United States should be used as an experimental ground for this type of stuff.
And I don't disagree. I think
If you want to make California totally socialistic, for example, you can just make California totally socialistic and have them cradle to grave everything, and then we'll see if people want to move there or if people want to move away from there.
Right, and I don't disagree. I think that the idea, most of the socialist policies like the Medicare for all, I think would end up in a disaster. I think that almost any time we have governmental programs that are designed to be redistributive, that are designed to help poor people, ends up hurting poor people. Social Security could be an instance of that.
Yeah.
So I agree with all that. My quibble is, as much as a hatred of socialism, I do understand we do need some sort of federal policies that are socialist-esque, such as infrastructure, such as defense spending. And as much as I might despise the ideology of socialism, I also am even more fearful of the idea of censoring free speech. And I think that anytime we criminalize thought or advocacy, we get into a real dicey ground. Because if you just...
Okay, let's talk about criminalizing speech. Okay. Is it okay to say, I have a plan for assassinating the president of the United States?
It depends. It sometimes is.
Is it okay to get some people in a room and say, let's do it?
It could be. It has to do with intent. For example, if I'm making a film about Al Qaeda and part of that film is me saying, I think we should assassinate the president, then that's legitimate because my intent is not legitimately advocating for the assassination.
If you're making a film, right. But if you have people in a room and you say to them, I have a plan to assassinate the president of the United States. If you just say that,
it has to.
Do you realize that you can be you for that?
But again, even if that's true that the government could arrest me for that, then that's unconstitutional.
It isn't
because
you have a credible plan.
But that again goes to intent.
Home.
Right. It has to do with the intent.
Oh no, actually, that the law. I want you to go back to your statement just now of intent. No, people are convicted of a crime not based on intent. Did he intend to do it?
Yes, but that doesn't mean it's constitutional.
In first degree murder, did you intend to do it?
Okay,
but actually, what you did, you can be, if you held up someone. Did you intend to hold them up or not? I mean, it doesn't matter.
Okay. Let me. So, if I can respond here, one, don't pay your taxes then because of socialist policies. You'll go to jail. Does that mean that the socialist policies are justified? You would say no. That's an abuse by law enforcement and by the government in forcing you to pay taxes to socialist programs.
Well, now wait a minute. So your taxes are taken out, right? So if you don't file, you're probably missing out on getting some money back.
The problem is, I guess what I'm trying to say is, the problem is I think you're conflating the fact that you can be arrested with something with, therefore that means it must be constitutional. And I don't think that's the case. The reason intent matters is this. I could be doing stand-up comedy and I could say, hey, maybe we should assassinate the president. I could be Kathy Griffin and have a severed head of Donald Trump as a joke. That's not a crime. And if she's arrested for that, that's a tragedy. That's First Amendment. Now, if your intent is to actually advocate a plan to cause harm to the president, I agree. That's something that could be arrested. But
but what I'm getting at is that advocating for a candidate because he's going to dip into the treasury or create money or something like that, which is the same thing, because you and I have this dollar bill and it's worth that much less when you create other dollars. Mm-hmm. So whatever it is, it's stealing. So that if you're advocating that someone steal, like, for example, do you think you should say, let's say you're in a bank and you're the next person in line says, one, and just point it at him and say, give me your money. Do you think you should be able to do that? Well, I'm just telling you that the thing is, we've been too lenient with these socialists. We've given them a long leash. We've given them we thought, oh, they'll never get anywhere with that. Well, they did, didn't they? And they created a lot of harm, and they've killed a lot of people in all these wars all over the world, and they've hung people from doorknobs, and they've done all kinds of stupid stuff with our money. And there's a lot of people that are in debt slavery. Usually it's from, a car payment that completely absorbs more, and high rents and all kinds of stupid stuff. So people are suffering because of this socialism, and we've got to stop it.
Yeah, but eliminating free
We've got
speech,
to put an end to it.
That's fine, and you could win that through the marketplace of ideas. Anytime that you rely on, I don't allow someone to advocate an idea, it should be criminalized, then you've already lost the debate, because you're saying in the marketplace of ideas, I can't win the debate. And furthermore, this relies on...
I don't know. Let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
Have you read Steve Leto's book on the theater in... I forget how long ago it was. Someone yelled fire in the theater because there were a bunch of people in there that they didn't like as far as their politics
Mm-hmm.
were concerned. So everybody stormed out of the place. There were a lot of people that were killed because it was a second floor thing, and they a narrow staircase going down, and they were all crushed
Mm-hmm.
going down that staircase. And so they made it illegal to yell fire in a crowded theater.
It's not illegal. That's a misconception. It's not.
Actually, you should read Steve's book.
Okay, let's say I go to my local theater and there's a fire in the theater, and I yell fire in that crowded theater. Did I commit a crime?
If there is a fire, then it's okay.
Right. So it goes back to intent.
But
right, it's the intent. It's the words themselves aren't criminalized, and this is the problem. My disagreement with you is this: if you think that someone's corruptly advocating socialism so that they could steal wealth and they think it's to personally enrich themselves or to damage the government, that would be one thing.
The intent is this. But you recall, hey, the old movies, black and white movies, in which the politician's saying, I promise everybody a chicken in every pot. And the next politician says, I promise everybody 2 chickens in every pot. And everybody laughs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was so funny then, but it's not funny now, because that's essentially what these politicians have been doing. And because they've been doing it, they've created a lot of destruction.
Okay.
And we've got to find a way to stop this crap. And just having it so that people can't say, I promise to take someone's, the money, public funds, and write you a check. I mean, what's wrong with that? That's not the end of the world if you can't do that, or if you can't do it by saying, well, I'll write a check, but it'll be to some third party who's going to provide you with some kind of stupid benefit.
Okay, let's look at it this way. There are people that feel the question of socialism versus capitalism, we may have our opinion, and I feel we're on the right side of we should lean towards smaller government, more capitalist free markets, etc. But there is an actual debate on what would be better for the country. Now, just because we're sure that our side's right, to me, what you're suggesting is in criminalizing disagreements and political disagreements. So there could be a group of people, let's say, if we say, yes, in theory, what you're saying is right, that we should criminalize things that would be massively damaging to the country.
Well,
if 51%,
yeah, wait a minute.
Well, just let me finish real quick. If 51% of the country said, we think capitalism is damaging to society, now the 49% of us that advocate capitalism are in prison. So you've actually criminalized political disagreement at this point.
We don't have to criminalize it. I mean, one thing is, if we take all the functions of government that should be done at the federal level, and then we say anything else is done by the states, then actually it would be legal in each state to go to your state senator or state representative and say, oh, I'm so poor, I want you to put some money in my pocket. And then the states that allow that type of thing to go on will either suffer or not suffer, depending on, but I think they'll suffer. Mm-hmm. But I don't want the federal government doing it.
But then that's a question of just not allowing the federal government to pass those laws. I don't know how you could if my neighbor's like, hey, you know what? I'd really like them to pass Medicare for all. I do not see a reasonable system in which they should be in prison for saying that. I mean, that's
okay. No, let's say we're not going to imprison you,
fine you.
but let's just say, I'm saying that your government should be doing this is not benign. It's not cute. It's not something that doesn't hurt anyone. It does hurt people, but at the very least, let's let the states immolate themselves if that's what they want to do. Some of the states, anyway, but I don't think all of the states would do that. I don't think Tennessee would do that,
Now you're
and I don't think Nebraska, North Dakota would do that.
Look, I believe in federalism. I believe in more state rights. I really do. In fact, I think the local government should have more impact over your life than even the state level, then the state, and then lastly, the federal government. And I think the founding fathers intended that. The problem is, I just don't see, like, I'm fine with all that saying, hey, enacting policy-wise, this is the way things should be done. And I understand that people advocating policies like that are dangerous to the country shouldn't be taken lightly, but I don't see how the government can enforce any kind of civil or criminal penalty on someone who has a differing opinion, even if it's an opinion you think would hurt the country. I don't understand how this couldn't be applied to religion. Like, people could say, I find that this religion is like Scientology, for example. I find that this religion is harmful, therefore anyone advocating for it should face a civil or criminal penalty. Yeah.
Let's talk about that. Who we should criminally penalize for a second. Maybe not the citizens themselves. Maybe the politicians. You're familiar with the 1984 book, and the book inside it called it's a handbook for oligarchical collectivism. And this oligarchical collectivism basically is a handbook that says we never intend to give these people what we promised to give them. We're only going to distribute it among us elites because we are more equal than others. And we're a special society. And the people who are, in the inner circle will be the ones who will get the most money, and then the outer circle will get a little bit more. And that's the way we'll do it. And so it's sort of like a handbook inside that 1984 book for that kind of thing.
But again, and that's why I was focusing on this idea of intent.
So it's a scam.
We're right. Is it?
So it's a scam.
But now you're going back to, you have to prove someone's intent then. If Bernie Sanders legitimately thinks that this is the best way to govern, it's one thing if we find writings of him saying, yes, I'm going to corruptly steal everyone's money and use government authority to oppress them. That's one thing. But if he's like, look, I legitimately thought this was the best system, how do we then punish him? And
well, wait a minute now. Suppose someone legitimately thinks that they should walk down the street with their gun, in open carry on a hair trigger all the time. In other words, all they'd have to do is take a wrong step and it would go off and at least, a ricochet off the floor, and it might hurt somebody. You wouldn't want them to be able to do that, would you?
It's different, though, because it would be like saying, so then under that example, it would be like this. Hey, I think we should pass the USMCA because I think it'll really bring jobs. That has nothing to do with socialism. I just think we should have this trade policy. And then it turns out that... But just hear me out for a second.
What I'm getting at is that you wouldn't want someone say walking down the street with a machete in their hands, juggling it, walking down next to babies walking down on the sidewalk. You wouldn't want that.
But again...
So the thing, because it's dangerous. It's dangerous behavior. Well, it's dangerous behavior to advocate socialism. And there are millions upon millions upon millions of people who would come back from their graves and agree with me on that subject, who have been destroyed in actually socialism, communism is a form of socialism.
Okay, millions of people have
So
died.
I'm including all the people who died in Russia and in China. I'm including all those people who are being persecuted today in China. Even ask any person who's Christian who's in China right now.
But
Are they
listen,
being persecuted?
but I don't disagree with that. Bernie Sanders are a socialist, and I'm not agreeing with them, but they could say this. Look at how many people have died in the United States for lack of health care. Thousands of people have died that didn't get the proper health care. Therefore, it's your system that you're advocating has led to the death of thousands of people. Therefore, if you run for office, you should be jailed if you advocate these plans.
Hold on. When you bring up something as an example, let me just jump in and say about healthcare. Do you know that healthcare is an infinite proposition?
Yes, and it's
that is when you talk about proper healthcare. If let's say you spend $1 million on healthcare and more people survive, and they survive to the age of 85, and then you spend $10 million and they survive to the age of 90. Well, at 85 and 90, do you know how much you have to spend to keep someone alive? So I'm saying the more successful you are giving people, quote, proper health care, the more you'll find that you have to spend, because your idea of what is proper keeps being extended ad infinitum until you're exhausting many times the resources of your country to try to keep people alive until they're 125 years old.
I don't disagree, but now we're talking about value judgment. How much is a life worth? The point is, when you say, I feel that what you're advocating has led to deaths, even though it's just a political, it's not you're advocating we should shoot people in the face. It's you're saying, I have this plan, I think it would be better for our country. When you say, well, if I could prove that that's been unsuccessful in other places, you should have to go to prison for advocating that if you're a politician.
No. This is what I'm saying is what this person is advocating has been movement, has been proven by the history of our country for the last 50 years. We have the proof before us that it is damaging.
Right. What I could
we've
say
witnessed
it.
it.
I could say that anytime we've tried
to criminalize, it isn't like we've been had to be. It isn't like we've had to be educated. Schools. It isn't like we've had to look back into history.
Right, but I can make the same argument. Anytime we've tried to criminalize certain forms of advocacy,
not only hurting,
anytime we've tried to
criminalize
certain forms of advocacy or speech, every single time that's ended in a disaster. So if we could say we can't advocate socialism because it's always failed,
I don't know. You know that speech is being controlled from day to day by YouTube.
Give me an example of a time in history in the United States or anywhere else where we said it is criminal to advocate for the following belief system that it's worked out.
Okay, let's get away from the notion of.
Oops, sorry, you're breaking up there. You there?
So
you're breaking up on me.
You're demonetized or something like that. So we know. I'm breaking.
Yeah. Try again. Try talking again.
Are you
Sorry,
there?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. One of the things that I put in my two-pager to you.
Yeah, I'm looking at.
Is the fact that YouTube has been trying to control, say, and to some degree they've been doing things, hasn't really been criminalizing certain speech, but it sure
you broke up again on me.
In some ways, thinking about that. But I think it's possible that we could take social media and say, when people advocate socialism, we'll make it look like on their screen like their comment got posted or whatever it is, but it didn't get really posted. No one else saw it. And their voice will just go out into nothingness. And that would be one way to approach this, would be just not to let them communicate what is really a sort of like a virus.
No, I couldn't
to other people.
I could not disagree more. I think that as soon as you give the government to start censoring people on social media based on what they claim is harmful ideology, all these Second Amendment advocates would no longer be on social media. Anybody who criticizes the government and the establishment now and their foreign regime change wars would no longer be on social media. That's the problem. When you start to say, I am so certain that my belief system's right, and therefore the government should step in and not leave the opposite belief system. Once you give the government that authority, they will use it over and over again in the worst possible way.
Well, wait a minute. It's being used.
And it's terrible.
Against us, right?
Right.
And you know this, what they say about bringing a knife to a gunfight is not a great idea.
So you would say do you find it immoral that they're shadow banning conservatives now?
Well, I think that to the good is that said are the only ones that are empowered to do anything effective is also
but if you
think the good people should have guns,
right? But if you think
it's like, how are you going to defend yourself against people conspiring to take your money unless you stop it? And if you don't stop it, if one wants to propose a way to stop it, which is what's been going on the last 50 years, we've been involved in this. Oh, we can't interfere with their rights. They must be able to do law, and then it just goes on forever. And then look where we've gotten to, because nobody's been willing to do anything effectively against the socialists.
But the way to
stop them from doing it.
So the way to stop their censorship is to censor them.
I'll say that's, one of the things that I wanted to do in this conversation was to open the door to some discussion about corrective measures, and to put out some corrective measures. And if anyone's got a better idea as to how to turn off this socialistic stuff that's harming our society, and I don't think anyone thinks that they're not harmful. And then if someone has a better plan for doing away with these people or doing, then I'm willing to listen to it.
Well,
but it would be suppressing their speech that advocates it. Probably would be something that would be the least, because they're not really being convicted of a crime. We're just taking their advocacy for socialism and saying, okay, you can't have the megaphone to broadcast that out to people.
So they've done studies,
and I don't see anything wrong with that.
I've done they've done studies that I've seen where they talk about in countries where they've criminalized what they call hate speech. Inevitably, what happens is the groups that are using that hate speech actually get increased support. So, for example, if you would say we're not going to allow anyone advocating for white nationalism to ever speak in the United States, as soon as you censor that speech, what happens is more people go to that group.
Yeah, Rob, this is the argument that has been propounded over the years, that somehow we need to put up with this.
Right.
We need to put up with their speech. We need to put up with them organizing and electing their candidates. We need to do that. And what I'm saying is, well, we did that. We tried that. Where did we get? They completely ruined our society practically, and we were only just barely saved because the military interfered with a computer that was going to miscalculate the votes. I don't know if you know that story.
I do
but
not.
there are several computers that tallied up the votes from the states, and the first one went ahead with the usual whatever it was, and mistallied the votes, and then Hillary was ahead, and everybody thought she was going to win. And then suddenly, when the second one happened, and the white hats knew how to detect the computer was being hacked, and they called up the place that it was being hacked from, which was the CIA, and says, if you don't break the link, we're going to drop a nuke on you. And you have about a minute to figure this out. And the link turned off. And that's how Trump won the election.
That's perhaps true. I don't know. I have no way of verifying it, but perhaps.
Well, I have this from a particular several sites, but that's I tend to believe it, but I can't tell you right now that that's absolutely true.
Right. And
but that's the
and if that's but my
one
point
of
is
the
that's like, see, this to me is getting real close to the dangers we see on the left. So for example, I have a friend that is absolutely certain we're dead in 10 years from climate change. And the only way to solve that, it's a small chance. We're probably dead no matter what we do, he thinks. The only way to solve it is to completely ban fossil fuels today. Now, he knows that that will mean the death of poor people around the world because fossil fuels is the only cheap energy they can afford. But he's willing to take that chance based on his belief we're all dead in 10 years. I don't know that I'm willing to shadow ban people of a certain and censor people of a certain ideology because the military.
Well, what does he say? What does he say when he looks at a picture of the face and he sees that 90% of the crap that's going into the atmosphere is going in from India and China?
Right. Well, he thinks they shouldn't have fossil fuels either. They'll die. That's my point. Do you know how many poor people in India will die?
About them to do that.
But right, but again, see, and this is the problem.
Yeah.
We're getting into so what it is you're certain that he's wrong. He's certain that you're wrong about socialism. Now, I agree with you about socialism.
Well,
right? So the problem is once we say I'm positive that I'm right, therefore I censor. The other thing is when you say that we have no thing, you make it sound like we're doomed. This is our last chance. If we don't censor socialism now, we're doomed. I don't think it's that bad. And I think what you have to factor in.
Okay.
But, well, just wait. Let me finish.
Let's go.
What you have to factor in is, can your plan make things worse? Yes, it can. Just like when we try to censor white supremacist groups and we end up with more white supremacists. If you censor socialism and cause a mass movement for people right now that wouldn't endorse socialism to say, my God, the United States government is now forcing social media to not allow people to talk about socialism. This must prove that socialism has something to it. You're going to speed up the power and influence of socialists by tenfold. The way to deal with them is to do the exact opposite of what they're doing. Encourage free speech, encourage having dialogues with them. Just like you deal with the racist. The way you deal with the racist isn't shutting them up. The way you deal with the racist is say, go ahead, talk. Leave everyone hear how insane you are. That's how we deal with the socialists. If we censor them, it's going to make the problem 10 times worse.
Well, in some respects, I agree with what you're saying. I'm going back to studying the revolution. And I'm noticing how public thought in the colonies was vastly different from in 1776. And in some respect, I think that we're trying to do the same thing with public thought in this country, is to have the same kind of transition, only not to take 16 years to do it. And I don't know what year you would assign for when we started, embarked on this seriously. But gosh, there was, and they got back off on taxes on a particular type of on the stamp and people across the nation had bonfires of celebration in the colonies.
Mm-hmm.
And however, another portion of that was, but we have the right to do what, as far as the colonies are concerned. But they figured that was just them trying to save face. And at that time, there was not a lot of support for independence. Well, it could be that we're going to just be able to persuade the other side to start behaving properly. But it could be also that these people have been so brought up on evil, and that it's been such a part of their, over the last 50 years.
But again, we agree
into any their ways, and whenever
you're cutting out.
they're just going to lie harder.
Okay, but
Okay.
we agree on the problems with socialism.
They're just going to lie with a bigger lie.
Right. We agree
that
on
they're never going to.
Okay, but listen, we agree on the problems of socialism. I agree with that. Like, I'm not saying that for anyone who's listening. I'm not saying there's not a problem with the advocacy of socialism. My issue is, how do we best deal with it? I think that your solution will make the problem 10 times worse. Not only won't make the problem worse with giving authority to socialists, which will give them a legitimate beef, that an abuse of government power and censoring them. But I also think that anytime we give the power to the government to do something like censor someone's public speech for policies we disagree with, it will be abused every single time. So, for example, if you look at the example you gave of Davy Crockett, and for those of you, it's I think it's like this first link or the second link on the description. The situation is something like this. They want to pass a resolution to give a widow or to give someone money, federal money, and Davy Crockett votes against it. And basically his point is that's not the role of government. We should all privately be charitable to this woman, not the government. But even he didn't suggest criminalizing the person who put forth the bill, or claiming the person who put forth the bill was not allowed to speak in public about advocacy for that bill. So I think even he would understand that that's a huge danger.
So let's talk about, another possibility is to educate voters to actually say, hey, being born in this country is not enough. You need to understand what the idea of America is. And you need to pretty much, I think you're familiar with all the kinds of things that citizens, people from immigrants from other countries who wanted to become citizens, they have to go through these classes.
Yes.
And they have to learn. They have to learn what the three branches of government is and why power is supposed to be divided and all this stuff. And they have to pass these tests. Well, another approach is simply to say, okay, before you can vote, you must pass these tests. You must. Maybe it isn't 3 years worth of stuff. Maybe it's the amount of information that's in like a driver's license manual. We certainly do require people before they drive to pass the test.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can be even more destructive to other people by the way you vote than the way you drive, then certainly people who vote should know something about what their vote should mean and what it will mean to other people if they vote certain ways, and how they'll be hurting other people if they do certain things.
There is right now there's a liberal listening to you saying, yes, exactly. I agree 100%. And this is why no Trump supporter should ever be allowed to vote. They're less educated. They don't go to university as much as other. Exactly right. This gentleman's exactly right. That's my fear and the problem.
I wouldn't say that it had anything to do with being a supporter of anyone.
Right.
When you are learning about the Constitution, the Constitution is the Constitution. I don't know, maybe somebody thinks the Constitution is on one side or another of this? And if so, that I think they should vote on the side of the Constitution myself.
Well, right. I agree. So
Const-
you're saying you have to pass a test that you're so knowledgeable on the Constitution before you be allowed to vote.
enough. I don't know what degree that would be, but certainly, if we can require people to know everything in the little driver book, how many pages is that? What, 20 pages? Mm-hmm. And be able to pass a 20 question test? Doesn't that sound like a good idea? Something about the idea of me?
No, I think it's completely different because what you're
Does that make
talking
sense?
about is personal action personally affecting someone else versus being punished by your vote or being held to account for damages of people based on your vote, even if it's well intended. So,
well, I'm not holding. I'm just saying, before you vote, you should be able to pass a test on. It's not even 101, but you should understand what the Declaration of Independence. You don't even know what the Declaration of Independence is. If you don't even know what the three branches of government are, if you don't even know why they're supposed to be there, why should you be allowed to vote? Just because someone promises you 2 chickens in a pot?
So if I could say legislative, executive, judicial, by the way, I'm a huge socialist, I'm still allowed to vote? I know all about the Constitution. I could quote it, but I'm a socialist. Am I allowed to vote?
If you could at least, they're talking about letting people vote who just register the same day and don't ask them anything else. And I would say, if we're trying to people to vote in a way that won't destroy their own country, well, why don't we? Well, here are the principles our country was founded on. Mm-hmm. If they can't even pass a test on that, then you think they ought to vote?
Yeah, I don't think that we should have some sort of intellectual benchmark for allowing people to vote. I think
intellectual. Right. I mean, in other words, the Constitution is too intellectual.
Yeah, I think it requires some degree of education.
I'm going to disagree with that. If the Constitution is too intellectual, and that's our excuse for not knowing, anything about the idea of America. No, I don't. I can't agree.
So I could say this. Well, let me just play devil's advocate. Okay, I'm a huge liberal. I'm a Bernie bro. Let's pretend I'm an Antifa member, and I say, look, this country was founded on the idea that we need to fight against corruption and people that judge you based on things like your race. I feel that Trump supporters are racist. Therefore, I feel that anyone who takes our test on the Constitution should say things like, does it allow people to advocate for racist policies that say we don't allow immigrants to come in? The Constitution, for example, says we're all created equally under God's law. Therefore, the Constitution would mean that there shouldn't be borders. So anyone who tests this and says there should be borders shouldn't be allowed to vote. Like, once you say, here is a benchmark, right? And here's the problem, though. Like, we can't even agree, like, pick one amendment. We can't even agree with the Second or the First Amendment.
We're such
right? We can't agree. There are people that go
all of those statements were such leaps.
Okay.
In logic.
The Second Amendment doesn't mean it was just referring to militias.
Well, a militia is composed of the citizenry.
Yeah, well, they disagree. They think it's just organized militia. So says actual Constitution scholars that have gone to school for 10, 12 years. In fact, there are constitutional scholars right now advocating on behalf of the Democrats that what Trump did was impeachable. Yeah, now, that's clearly nonsense, but they could pass that test better than me, right?
You know that I know because I've heard you probably talk about, or at least the group of 6 of you guys who were talking. Mm-hmm. Counties and municipalities in Virginia. Something's going to happen. We're talking about making everyone in their jurisdiction.
Oh, you're cutting out on me.
then one of the other person of the six, when you know something, they are without.
I'm dropping you. You're cutting out. I couldn't hear what you
So
said there. The last.
and you say organized. Yeah, this discussion was, you were part of the
Right.
discussion at some point when, do you have to be in an organized militia or not? And there were people in the discussion who said, no, you don't have to be in an organized militia to be a member of a militia. So, but
Yeah,
if you
obviously,
did, municipalities could just say everybody in our state or in our
right.
county is automatically a member of the militia.
Right, I agree with you. I mean, clearly, I agree with you. I think that interpretation of the Second Amendment is terrible. I just use it as an example that just saying, oh, well, if we required everyone to know what the Constitution said, then surely no one would ever endorse socialism. It's fundamentally not true. There are plenty of educated people that went through an indoctrinated academic system that come out, quote, constitutional scholars that are totally advocating for socialist policies. Do you remember what Barack Obama was, what his major was?
No, but I think it was.
Yeah.
I don't think he spent a lot of time studying anyway. I
Well,
don't think
right,
he even attended.
but that's his
tests.
degree. That's his degree that he was a constitutional scholar. And clearly, we don't agree with his interpretation. And this becomes the problem. It becomes a slippery slope. Once you have like certain criteria, we say only this group of people is allowed to vote. Even if you think, well, it's a commonsensical thing. The next group will get into power and say, well, wait a minute. It would also be common sense and lead to better governance to have this one more criteria to vote. It has to be people.
I want to include a reference here to Robert Heinlein. I don't know if you've ever read anything by him.
I don't think.
He spells his name Heinlein, as the right at Heinlein. Mm-hmm. Robert Anson Heinlein, father of modern science fiction.
Okay.
And he wrote a book called Starship Troopers, which there was a couple of movies of.
Yeah,
they didn't really.
I've seen the movie and I know a little about the book. Yeah.
They didn't zoom in on this particular thing, but there's a lot of in his books, there's a lot of political theory.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I recommend that you read all of his books because they are so much fun to read. Mm-hmm. They keep you, they're the kind of things that keep you up till 1 a.m. reading them. But that's another story. Anyway, he said in this Starship Troopers, the theory that everyone should serve in the military mm-hmm. before they're allowed to apply to be a citizen, because that way they will value citizenship. Mm-hmm. And I must say, I think there's some merit to that argument.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that
I disagree with that. But I get what he's trying to say, but I do disagree with that. But
citizenship, I don't think should be conferred lightly, and certainly if it has any value, if you want people to value their citizenship, you shouldn't be giving it away to the world.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm clearly against open borders and that type of idea, of course. But if you're a legal citizen here currently, I don't know how we could now say, okay, well, now you have to pass X test before, or else you lose your citizenship, or at least you lose some of your rights of your citizenship.
Let me ask you this. Mm-hmm. If I had to ask you for an estimate of how many people are here illegally right now, what number would occur to you?
I would guess 25 million would be my guess.
25 million people, right?
Yep.
Okay. I'll say right now and go on the record and say I'm in favor of repatriation.
Okay.
And I'm in favor of repatriation on a grand scale. Of all the people who don't belong here, it's time for them to go home. Mm-hmm. And that would be helpful in trying to remedy. But see, the thing is, the evil that these people have brought upon our country has gone into so many different places. It's infiltrated its way into everything, in distorted markets. It's practically completely ruined our country.
Well, I don't disagree. There's a lot of problems with illegal immigration and with people that advocate for policies like that. But one of the things that they've done is they've had like indoctrination, censorship, all this sort of stuff that's been going on for decades. You say, don't bring a knife to a gunfight. I say, if you employ those same tactics, inevitably, the person that will take the reins of those tactics on, quote, our side will use it to be just as abusive, just coming from the opposite end of the spectrum. So instead of advocating...
Well, I hope that's not true.
It is. It's true every single time.
I hope that's not true.
That's why we should have
must
small
confess,
government. Yeah, when you give the government these sorts of powers, they always... You can't name an example where they're not abused.
Yeah, I must confess to you that 6 years ago, I thought this country's over. I heard about them building the holding pens outside the Walmarts and all the tunnels and all the plans to put people in camps. And I'm pretty sure that you agree that that's what was going to happen if Hillary was elected.
No.
If it wasn't World War III.
I don't think, I think that it's hyperbolic, the idea of like rounding people up and putting them in camps. I think it's inevitably that could happen, certainly, but I don't think it would have been that quick. See, the thing is, it's not that they're not nefarious. It's not that the globalists and the people advocating that don't seek total control over all of your liberty. They do. It's just they understand that they're not all powerful. So the way to get there is incrementally, and it's through incremental kind of intrusions into your life. So one of the reasons that I thought this would be an interesting debate would be, we agree on kind of the terrible nature of what that sort of planning would lead to. I think, though, that we're far from there, and that we could actually come back from the brink by having open dialogue, by proving our side's the side of free speech. We're not trying to censor people because we have the better ideas. We're making inroads with younger people in like below the millennial generation. We're making inroads with independent content creators that are sharing truth. If we reverse course and we say, nope, now we're censoring the side that disagrees with us, we will give away every advantage that we've worked so hard for. We will be instantly smeared, and people in the middle that we still need to try to convince to come to our side will say, yep, this side's no worse or no better than the other side. They're a bunch of censorious people that want government power to silence the voices of those they disagree with. And that ends up pushing us far closer to the future you're talking about than the status
quo. Well, I think it's a worthy discussion to have at this point, to put that, what you've just said, against what I've just said, because I don't think I think we're at the point where we need to say, hey, look, what we've been doing, look where we've got. It hasn't worked. Are we really going to be? The socialists, on the other hand, will say the only reason socialism doesn't work is because we haven't had enough of it.
Right. So let's say they win the next election. If we say now, because Trump's president or whatever, Trump comes out with an executive order and he says, oh, okay, we're going to censor conversations of socialism online, and politicians that advocate socialism will be jailed. But let's say Bernie wins in 2020 and he says, I will continue with the policies that Trump instituted, and I will say that anyone that does not endorse Medicare for all is no longer allowed to speak online. Who are we then to... Okay, they have the power now, and they'll wield that power to shut us up. Look at.
I don't think you have to use Bernie as an example.
It could be Biden,
sort of a far-fetched example, but I'll give you an example that is not so far-fetched. You know that the people who are on the bad side have been using bribery and blackmail to get whatever they want. And you know that they have had control.
You there?
And
sorry.
Yeah, I'm still here. Sorry. And so I think there is a possibility, however slim, I would hope it to be, that they actually want this impeachment to go to a vote, and and they could influence Republican senators to convict. Actually,
it could happen.
They would only need what? They'd only need about 20 of them, wouldn't they?
Yeah, 18, I think, but yeah.
And so, don't you think they have dirt on 20 Republican senators?
Sure, maybe.
So Trump has gone to them probably and said, "I'll protect you against that," or something similar, or tell me who's threatening you, or that type of stuff. But in the end, with one of the ways that this could, maybe it's only a 1% chance or a no percent chance, but I'm afraid that has a possibility of happening, and that could happen, next week.
Right, it could, and I mean, but what is the best defense against that? So, like, if Trump came out and said, "Oh, okay," so for example, just on that, I think that I've made a case on my channel of the corruption of the intel community, people like Adam Schiff. I think I've made that case quite convincingly. If Trump comes out and says the case is so self-evident that Schiff and the FBI and these people have engaged in some sort of coup against me, therefore, I am enacting an executive order to say anyone who goes on social media and talks about the allegations in the dossier, that talks about Schiff being good or talks about the allegations in the impeachment, I will censor them. I think
I'm not saying that he should do that.
Well, right, but it's the same type.
Let's get away from this criminalizing talk. And I'm just telling you, there is. We're talking about this. You talked about the word gradualism, as if the other side wanted to be gradual.
Yes.
And I'm saying next week, if they take over things, if they actually pull it off, what they'd like to do, and get Trump impeached and have Pence in power, and they've got Pence under their thumb, it's going to be like Virginia on steroids.
Well, right. There would be certainly a lot of protests, but what they would not do.
There's not going to be any gradualism at that point. It's going to be like a tidal wave of socialistic tyranny.
You were talking about FEMA camps. So you think if Trump's impeached, they're going to throw 60 million people in FEMA camps?
I think that if Hillary had gotten into power, that her presidency would have been so oppressive that, yes, FEMA camps would have been bulging.
I
or
just disagree.
Whatever.
And I've no love for Hillary, but I don't.
I suppose you don't know anything about the rumors about trains.
No,
rails inside the trains, handcuffs, big places where there were big burial spots for bodies. You know nothing about that from the internet?
No, I've heard about it. I just don't believe that it would be enforced that quickly.
But why were our tax monies being paid for that, all that crap? Why did they have the training exercise Jade Helm, in which they were trying to train our military to shoot civilians, to take our guns, and to they trained people with tractors to dig mass graves? Why was all this going on? Do you think it was because they were just, like playing games or something? You don't think they were serious about doing away with 90% of humanity?
No, I don't think it's going to happen in 4 years. I think it would be gradualism and incrementalism. If all this is true, Jade Helm happened under Obama, right?
Yeah.
Why not do it then? What held them back? Wasn't Obama?
What held them back? One thing was that all the sergeants and staff sergeants and chief master sergeants and all these people who they tried to get to do this stuff said, "The hell with that. That's not what I joined the service to do.
Okay.
I'm not."
Yeah, fair enough.
I swore to uphold the Constitution, and I'm not going to become a domestic enemy.
Sure, it sounds reasonable to me. So Hillary gets elected, and they say, "I changed my mind." That doesn't seem reasonable to me. Those staff sergeants would still say, well, no.
Pardon me. I mean, who's changing their mind?
You said the reason that this didn't happen under Obama was a bunch of patriotic military people said, no, you can't get me to turn on my countrymen. But if Hillary would have been...
but those are, and basically 85% of the military is the white hats.
Okay.
And maybe it's 95%. I'm not sure.
Okay. Why would they change their mind when Hillary got elected?
95% by now.
Right. But do you see what
I'm sorry. I was talking over you.
Go ahead. Why would they change their mind when Hillary got elected? So under Obama, they're like, we won't do this. But then Hillary gets elected and they're like, we changed our mind. I mean, I just don't see it like that.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but
that's my argument for gradualism is that before you get the military to turn on people in mass ways like that you need, it's going to take a long incremental...
Ask me a question, answer it.
Okay.
I mean, you asked me a question, why would it be different? And my answer is Hillary's absolutely ruthless.
And Obama wasn't.
Well, Obama sat in the White House, ask temperature up to 80 degrees. He basically, he didn't make people hate him. A totally hateful person.
But I'm just
totally different.
I'm trying to work through this plan. So 85% of the military was basically forced to go through exercises that was like, we're going to lock up millions of people in these FEMA camps.
No. Jade Helm was only a certain percentage of the military. But I'm telling you that basically, even at that point, they had the idea that 85% of the military, at least, was loyal to this to the Constitution.
Okay, fair enough. So small portion did Jade Helm. 85% loyal to the Constitution. Hillary gets in. She's ruthless. So she scares the 85% of military people into not upholding the Constitution because she's ruthless, or she fires them and the 85%.
Okay, just a minute now.
Okay.
There's a movie called Hillary's America.
Okay.
And I don't know if you've seen this. It's a very good movie by Dinesh D'Souza.
I think I've seen it. I think I have.
And I'm thinking of the scene in which she's walking through the airplane. And as she walks, everyone kind of like steps to the side or looks down. No one looks in her face. I tell you, everyone in government is afraid of that woman.
I don't buy that. I don't buy that 85% of our military is patriotic, but they're cowardly enough to be scared of a woman that they will then put millions of people in FEMA camps. I just don't believe that.
No, I'm not. I didn't say they were cowardly.
Well, I mean frightened or whatever.
But I don't know if you know the story that 6 of them were.
Oops, sorry, you cut out there.
At that point, they started all flying separately, but or that several hundred Obama fired several hundred high-ranking, like generals and so forth, replaced them with his cronies. Do that pretty quickly if you want to, actually.
But I just don't think that. Like, I just can't.
The way that the way that Stalin did it. He took everyone that was a major or above out and shot them.
Right, we're not there yet. We're not close to that.
Telling you that
there would be. Just think about the implications. How far are we away from where Hillary got elected? And she's like, "Yeah, we're going to shoot 10% of the military, the higher ups." You don't think that? Even
it's not even 10%, but it's the point is that how much can be done secretly.
Yeah,
based on all the secret things that have been going on the past 2 years, how much can be done secretly.
So here's why I bring the reason I bring this up is I think that there's a danger of being too hyperbolic, because when you start to say, man, FEMA camps are around the corner. Millions of us are going to be locked up. All it takes is one election. then it's easy to start justifying things like saying, we're going to censor people that disagree with us on social media. And that's,
what I was going to tell you was this, that 5 years ago, I didn't see how I could do anything else other than end up as either dead or in one of these camps.
but you were wrong.
5 years ago, that was just, I was going to live long enough to be, somebody's going to come to the door and they're going to whisk me away, get your belongings and get on the truck.
Yeah, and you were wrong though. I mean, that didn't happen.
Yeah, but only because of a miracle that happened on election night, in which they found the computer that they were trying to break into, and they got them to break their lock.
As certain as you are of that, if Trump had not been elected, that would happen. I listened to people that were equally certain if Mitt Romney didn't win and Obama won again, that was it. We're all in FEMA camps. That's the end of it. But it didn't happen. And so I think I just caution people.
It could still happen.
Now, look,
it could still happen, but I think that we're the Patriots. I think the Patriots are winning.
Right, exactly. That's exactly the point. We are starting to get inroads, so we don't want to.
I think a good sign that the Patriots are winning is that the Virginia demonstration came off peacefully.
Right.
Because, and by the way, one of the interviews that I saw about that, the cops said that all the bus loads of people, the Antifa people that came in, that they isolated them around the south side of the area and kept them under watch and didn't let them go out into the rest of the area. Mm-hmm. Now that's not generally publicized, but that I'm inferring that from the remarks of the cops made on video. Mm-hmm. But I think the Virginia State Police were the ones that prevented something bad from happening.
I mean, that's probably true. I think it's evident that in Charlottesville, the police intentionally started a powder keg. Like that's obvious. But the point is, we are starting to get inroads. Now, am I guaranteeing a victory? No, I can't do that. But I do know this, that there are people that are kind of saying the same type of things you're saying here that are literally making the argument. The Patriots at Virginia should have went in guns a-blazing into the governor's mansion because we're all going to be in FEMA camps if we don't do it. And there's a danger in that, especially when we're starting to win the intellectual battle. And so what I'm saying is we're not at the point where we're beyond the point of no return. I'm
glad what happened.
Right.
But I'm unwilling to agree that we need to play patty cake with these people.
So you would have suggested that possibly violence.
I'm unwilling to say, I'm reading about what happened in the revolution. Some of the things they did, these tax collectors, tax assessors, they got them to resign in various ways. One of the things was they would get outside their house, they'd burn the guy's thing in effigy, and then they'd go in his house and completely destroy everything. Pull everything off the wall, destroy all the furniture, everything like that, and leave his house, pretty much a shambles. Mm-hmm. And if that didn't work, one time they took him out to the cemetery, they put him in a box, and they buried it. And then finally, after there was a couple feet of dirt over his coffin, he goes, "I'll resign." He's knocking on the box, Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of intimidation sometimes that has to take place.
Yeah. I mean, I do agree. I understand that, but I just think that I really wanted to talk to you about this because I think in wake of Virginia, I've been dealing with a lot of people that are like, we need to up the intensity. There needs to be violence, or the government needs to ensure that certain things aren't said. And to me, this is a direct path to exactly what we accuse our opponents of. And I think that one of the things that makes us both morally righteous and strategically correct is not engaging in the same tyranny that the people we disagree with do. And so I think that we see this on like all over the internet where people are like, you know, it's not enough. The patriots that went to Virginia are cowards. They should have went in armed. They should have been firing their guns in the air. That would be devastating for our cause. Absolutely devastating. If we started to publicly push for laws that said certain types of left-wing speech should be censored, it would crush our movement. Absolutely crush it. And so I'm not disagreeing with you about the dangers of socialism. I'm disagreeing with how bad are things right now. Are we on the verge of being locked up in FEMA camps? I don't think we are. And I think that if we think we are, then it encourages us to make mistakes where we advocate basically incredibly extreme major measures to fight back against it. I guess that's my take on it. You still there? Oh, I didn't lose you, did I? I did lose him. I hope he wasn't angry. Maybe he'll call back. I'll stay on for a couple more minutes and see if he calls back. But yeah, I think Tom sounds like a good guy. I agree with him on the dangers of socialism. I do, but there's a problem. I think I didn't get to articulate this very well, but the problem is when you criminalize political speech that you don't like because you say if that speech would be enacted, then it would be bad for the country. That assumes you know the answer. Now, I agree. I think we know the answer that socialism's bad, but you can't criminalize people because their policy would not have worked out. Because what you end up doing is you then allow a tyranny of the majority and a tyranny of the government, where 51% of people could say, we think it would be bad to advocate Christianity in the United States. Therefore, Christianity is now hate speech and it's rightfully to be censored. I think that's a huge mistake when you get to those type of measures. So it's strange because you can see, I think Tom sounds like a great guy. And by the way, for those wondering, he was just someone I met on the chat. I really hope he's not upset. I really hope he comes back. But it's we just have this disagreement on how far we should take things. That's what it is. And I think that, again, morally, I think that's wrong. What do you think would be said, you know, let's say Tom was running for office or there was a big movement shared by Tom of people that were like, yeah, it should be illegal to advocate for socialism. The government should censor the speech. Any politician advocating for socialism like Bernie Sanders should be jailed. What do you think that would do for the right wing? Do you think that then the average person would be like, yes, these right wing people sound very reasonable. They've locked up Bernie Sanders. I mean, for God's sakes, they're trying their damnedest to turn the country against Donald Trump because he wanted to correctly investigate corruption of Joe Biden. If instead he just said, hey, Joe Biden's advocating socialism, so we're going to lock him up. How do you think that would go? Trump's approval ratings would drop to like 5%. I would be one of the ones leading the charge against Trump. That is incredible government tyranny. Absolute incredible tyranny. And I don't want to see our side advocate the same sort of things that I criticize about the other side. Because I would say above all else, as much as I care for the Second Amendment, and I do and understand that all of them are important, to me, I would say I'm a free speech purist almost before anything else. Because I understand once you give the government the right to censor certain types of speech, it's a disaster. That's why I was focusing on define socialism. Did anybody here think we got a good definition of socialism? Like it was like redistributing wealth. Okay, what about Social Security? Well, that's a little different. The problem is when you say we will censor speech that advocates X, but I can't really define X, or people will disagree on exactly what X is. Now you've right out of the gate given the government the ability to say, we'll just call anything we don't like socialism. Oh, what's that, Tulsi Gabbard? You have a problem with our foreign regime change wars? Yeah, you're a socialist. You're not allowed to speak. We'll just throw you in jail. And we see how the government, if you watched my live stream earlier today, we see how the government selectively applies laws. Right? You can't, you have to register as a foreign lobbyist if you're lobbying for foreign governments, right? But the Podesta Group was allowed to do it. Mercury LLC was allowed to do it. You can't lie to Congress. But Brennan was allowed to do it. Comey was allowed to do it, etc. So if we say, yes, the government has the power to censor speech that they find are political beliefs that would be detrimental to the country, that's incredibly dangerous. Now, I know some of you, I was reading in the chat, and again, I didn't cut Tom off. I hope he comes back. I think maybe he just lost his connection, so I got the call ringing to him now. I'm hoping that he picks up. I really am. But understand the implications of this is it makes things worse, and it's immoral. I do think it's immoral. So that's not to say that I think Tom's a bad guy for advocating it. It's just a disagreement. By the way, I think he did a tremendous job of articulating his point. We weren't rude or anything like that. So I hope that everyone enjoyed it. I know we had some connection issues to start with, so I'm trying to call him again here now. I mean, you guys could tell me in the chat that we're here. I didn't say anything that maybe would have chased him away, I hope. Right? Can anyone tell me if they think I said anything that was personally troubling, maybe? I hope not. I hope that didn't happen. But I am putting in a call to him here now, so hopefully he answers. Because I'd like him to kind of wrap up. We'll see if he answers here. Because I feel like he's entitled to finish, to have a final say, even if we disagree. And I'm not trying to make fun of him with the FEMA camp stuff. No answer. Something must have happened. I'm not trying to make fun of people that believe. I do believe that they are paving the way for that. I just think that it's not right around the corner. Just like with climate change. Like, I feel there are all sorts of environmental problems. But as soon as you truly believe the fault, like, let's say you truly believe this about climate change. We only have 10 years to live. You will find yourself advocating such incredibly extreme plans. Oh, wait, here, I think he's back. Here we go. You there, Tom? Hello?
Hi, we got disconnected.
Oh, good. I was hoping you weren't like upset or anything. I was like, I do have to wrap up here by 6, but yeah. So I was just saying, real quick, and I'll give you the final thoughts on this. I was just saying I think we agree on the dangers of socialism. We disagree on whether or not the government should censor that type of speech, or if maybe politicians shouldn't be allowed to advocate it. We disagree on that. And I think we agree that the status quo is leading to all sorts of dangerous things, from people advocating globalism, socialism, things like that. But I think we disagree on whether we're the extreme of it, as far as like if we're all about to be locked up and things like that. But I do think we agree on a lot.
I don't know. I don't know. As I said, I think it was a very low percentage, if none, that's going to happen based upon what I surmise to be the truth. But I tell you, 5 years ago, it wasn't looking good. And here's what one of the things I surmise might have been the case, which was reported, was that Obama actually had the chief of the Navy into his office and said, I want you to get these aircraft carriers, and I'm giving them to the UN. And this was back in like 2012, if you can believe this. Mm-hmm. And the upshot of it was the guy told him no, not only no, but hell no.
Okay.
And that ever since then, you could say that there's been a revolution going on behind the scenes. If the president wants the military to do something, then that's itself. That is a revolution.
Yeah, I don't.
And that type of thing.
I don't disagree. I think that type of stuff's happening. I say on my channel all the time, one of the things I say is, there's this infighting that's occurring in the Democratic Party between like the Nancy Pelosi wing versus the AOC, the squad, right? Do you really think that Nancy Pelosi is less extreme than AOC? I don't. I think that Nancy Pelosi understands.
They're just all power hungry people that need to be got rid of in one way or another.
I agree. Well, I wouldn't advocate any sort of violence, but I agree they need to be removed from office, voted out. But I think that Pelosi is a more shrewd politician in that she understands it's not a winning position to come out and tell the American people right now, we want total control over the energy sector. We want to make it illegal for you to own a car. We want to make it illegal for you to eat meat. Now, she might want that. She wants that government power grab, but she understands the people in the United States would revolt immediately if those sort of draconian measures were put in. That's why I think we should not give the people we disagree with the good fortune of engaging in the same type of tyranny that we're criticizing about them. And I think that people like me and you having conversations proves that free speech is the way to go, because we'll be able to win that intellectual battle.
By contrast with Pelosi or whatever, HRC, by some reports, went to the Chinese and said, if you'll back me in the election, I'll give you Japan. I don't know if you ever heard that.
No.
But listen, I being a military retiree, I spent the last 5 years practically, at least probably somewhere around 5 hours a day listening. And generally, I give something more credence when it sounds like something that a person would do. It sounds like it's in character, for example. And I think the report might have been through Benjamin Fulford. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
No.
But she promised this, but then the only reason the Chinese didn't go along with it, she doesn't have a history of keeping her promises, and she thought that she would double cross them, and that type of thing. So, but she's totally ruthless. She has no regard, in my view, for anyone. Everyone, you'll see in the movie, everyone's afraid of her, and it's because and she even has a hit list, has a kill list. I mean, and people end up, like that guy on television that had the television show about visiting all the places. He ended up hanging from a doorknob.
Yeah, I mean, what I think about, I'm not saying anyone needs definitive proof to believe any of that. Like I just was saying earlier today, it's the official mainstream narrative that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. And I can tell you about 60 things wrong with that story. So if that's going to be the mainstream narrative, far be it for me to say anyone who wants to say, any other theory about Hillary Clinton or something is untrue. What I try to do in my personal life on my channel, I'm not an expert in kind of those type of things that I have to just take, on faith. I could tell that Hillary's a terrible person. I could tell that she broke the law. I could prove that. And I could see that her policies would have been damaging to this country for sure. I can't prove the kill list stuff. It doesn't mean it's not worth talking about. But that's just not my forte. What I try to do is explain to people based on the information that we could clearly see and clearly prove why you should be opposed to those people encouraging that sort of globalist ideology. So, but that's not to say that
I hope
you're
I don't
wrong.
sound.
I'm not saying that at
by
all.
the way, I hope I don't sound like I'm off my rocker by giving credibility to some of these quotes, conspiracy theories, end quote. Some of them haven't been proven as fact yet, but a hell of a lot of them have turned out to be fact.
Right. I mean, there were certainly things that you would have been labeled a conspiracy theorist that turned out to be absolutely true. I mean, that's certainly true. For example, the revelations we got about the NSA spying on Americans. That was you were a tinfoil hat wearer if you believe that. That was true. The idea that, there's no way that the U.S. would ever kill someone without a trial, a U.S. citizen. Obama did that. So certainly things have been found to be true. Yeah, people are saying Vince Foster. Yeah, I mean, when there's smoke, there's probably some sort of fire. It's my personal preference to try to, not try to. It's not my expertise, that's all. So I don't begrudge other people talking about it. A couple things before we go, I wanted to say, thank you for your service. I think that that's amazing. I never served, and I really do appreciate it. I thought, despite our disagreements, I had a wonderful time talking to you, and I thought you made some really good points. I think we agree on a lot, too. I wanted to briefly mention the top link on my description is a link to some like patriotic poetry and stories you've written. Would you like to talk about that just for a second so people could check that out?
Patriotic poetry. You got a link to patriotic poetry?
It should be on the
Oh, I
description.
didn't know that. Did you? Okay, on the description.
It's the
Okay, I
first-
haven't gone to the internet and looked for our
It should be the first link.
discussion.
It's to Amazon. Yeah.
Okay, what's the title of our discussion going to be?
Of this discussion? I have it titled right now. It says, debate, should it be legal to endorse socialism? And it should be live right now. And you should be able to check the description and see all the links. By the way, for those of you who joined us late,
I'm notified, so I should be able to just find it there and click on it.
For those of you that are listening, cool. A lot of what you're talking about, you did provide links, so you can check that out. Some videos, Dinesh D'Souza, the Davy Crockett article we were talking about. So you guys can check that out. But the top link for everyone, just so you know, that is some poetry that Tom wrote here. And again, for those of you joining late, Tom is someone that I met on, just like you all that are chatting to me now on a live stream, and he just emailed me with this suggestion for a topic to discuss. I think it went really well personally, so I'm glad that this happened. But yeah, did you want to talk a little about your poetry there?
Oh, the poetry I wrote. I started writing some narrative poems when I back in like the 80s, and I've done another one on the Pickett's Charge, and I'm thinking about writing one about Lexington and Concord. So currently I'm doing some reading about Lexington and Concord because, as you can see from this poem about the Battle of Bunker Hill, you got to get the facts and get them all in there. And you have not too much space to do that in a narrative poem. But I was trying to write something to the midnight ride of doing that. And then I went on the internet and found, I was trying to see, I was reading a book, Midnight Ride of Paul Revere, illustrated by Christopher Bing, which I like. Yeah, that's about a $10 book on Amazon.
Okay.
And I was going to try and format it exactly the same way, which was 8.5 tall by 11 wide. And then I couldn't publish it as a paper thing that way. I learned that afterward. So right now it's only there as like a $2 ebook file. So, but I hope everybody would enjoy it. You get it free if you're subscribed to Amazon Prime. So that free is free.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks so much for being here. Just to wrap up, and if you hang around, Tom, I'll talk to you just for a second once we're done here. Just to wrap up, to summarize our positions, Tom thinks that it should be, the government should take some sort of action. I think it's fair to say, Tom, you're not specifically outlining exactly what action, but you think the government should take some sort of action to not allow
I think it's time for us to be a little stronger in how we deal with socialism than we have in the past, because what we've done in the past hasn't worked. Mm-hmm. So I want other people to call you up and say, well, you guys didn't get around to this, but why don't you try thinking about doing this about socialism or that about socialism? Oops.
Yeah. And for me, I think the way to go about it is I'm fearful of ever having the government encroach on our First Amendment. And I think that open dialogue and kind of allowing, the more you allow their ridiculous positions to be heard, the more ridiculous they seem. So I don't want to drive that speech underground via the government, but I think we both agree mostly on the ideas of the dangers of advocating sort of this socialist, the establishment socialist that we see, kind of the globalism and that stuff. I think we agree that the thing that makes America unique and the best country in the world is our personal freedoms and liberty. So I think we're all on the same page there. And if you guys want to hear more on this, on socialism, check out the live stream I did earlier today, where my first hour and 15 minutes were about, I don't know if you saw this video, Tom, but this guy comes up to Elizabeth Warren and he says to her, hey, you want to forgive student loan debts? And she's like, sure. And he's like, hey, I did the right thing. I saved my money and paid for my daughter to go to college. Will I get my money back? And she says, of course not. And he's like, oh, so I get punished for doing the right thing. That's kind of socialism in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's right. That's similar to Davy Crockett and this other farmer.
Yes, absolutely. Which there's a link to that as well in the description. So yeah, check out that first hour and 15 minutes of that live stream if you like. Tom, do you have like any social media or anything that you'd like people to follow you on?
I really am just going to be doing stuff like this. Okay. I want you to call me back when you're ready to discuss anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
It might be a while, in the news or anything.
I would love to have.
Sometimes, actually, it's a lot more fun to have several voices.
Yes, agreed.
Discuss things like, for example, when you all had the 6-way on Virginia.
Yes. I do think, I will say this though, once you start to get more than 3 or 4 people, it gets difficult. Like if you have 6 people on an hour show, then it starts to become like CNN sometimes, I think, where it's like, you got to say what you want to say in a 2-minute soundbite, which I think this platform, I thought this kind of style, we both had a chance to say what we wanted. So I kind of like 2, maybe 3 people for a big in-depth discussion like this. But certainly I'd be happy to have you back on and talk to you anytime. Now, it might be a while because I'm busy, but yeah, I thought this was cool. Just to wrap up then.
Go
ahead, I'm sorry.
I won't just like, hey, looking down. We'll just have, quick analysis of it. You can just give me a call and see what you think.
Yeah, I would love to do that. So for everyone here, thank you for joining us. Just so you know, Tom, if you didn't see, we had 22 people at one point, which I think is pretty good. So as always, I'm humble that people would want to listen to me. Thank you for listening to Tom. I think anyone who wants to engage in a discussion like this or anything else, please, my email is just rob.nor@gmail. Just my name, rob.nor@gmail. So you can follow me there. You can follow me on BitChute and Twitter, and I have links in the description where you can support me on Patreon and PayPal. So thank you everyone for joining in. I do really appreciate it. I know I've been on here a lot today, so you're probably getting tired of hearing me, but I got to go before the wife gets home or I'll be in trouble. So thank you again, Tom. Tom, I'll talk to you in just 1 second here. And for everyone else, thank you so much and have a good one.